Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessa, and I'm so happy you're here for this episode of Better Sex. I've dedicated my professional life to helping couples enjoy a fulfilling, intimate life. I believe that sex is important. Our connections to other people matter, and we're not living our life to the fullest if we aren't connecting emotionally and sexually with our partner. That's why I'm here, bringing ideas and information to help you live and love better. So the topic today on Better Sex is pornography. And I've been looking forward to the show because I think this is really kind of a fascinating topic and complex. So today is not going to be about the politics of porn and the safety of the people producing it and acting in it, appearing in it. It's not about sort of the moral judgment about that or anything like that. It really is about what is the function of erotica in our sex lives? Where is it a healthy or productive use or of viewing and incorporating into our lives? And where does it become a problem? You know, when do we think it's a problem? What do we do when our partner thinks it's a problem? You know, how do we define when it is and when it isn't? I mean, it's so sort of nebulous, right? I mean, sometimes there's real clear-cut consequences to our behavior, and it's obviously a problem. But a lot of times it's more subtle than that. And of course, even if our partner thinks we have a problem, it doesn't mean we do, right? We might feel very good about our interaction with erotic material. Certainly there are benefits to it. It's part of what I wanted to cover in the episode is I think there's some real use to having what my guest is going to call a visual reference. You know, whether it's about sex in general or just about our own eroticism, can be a useful tool for learning, for exploring, and for sharing with a partner something that we can imagine or wanting. But it can certainly become a problem. It's the kind of thing that can separate people. It can take up hours of a day. It can interfere with work. I mean, certainly people can struggle with overuse or it taking too much of their life. So my guest today is Stephen Davidson. He's got over 30 years of experience in practice as a therapist. He's got a private practice in Nashville, though he's also licensed in Florida. And he's a certified sex therapist and has worked with an awful lot of people that come in, either concerned about their own pornography viewing or where their partner or someone in their life has had concern. And so we're going to have a conversation all about porn, and I hope you enjoy it. So, Stephen, thanks so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to talking about this topic, you know, pornography, because I think it brings up a lot of feelings in people, right? Controversial, perhaps.
It is very controversial, and it always has been.
Yeah, yeah. So let's start off. Do you have a way you define pornography? Like, what's pornography versus, you know, erotica versus, you know, anything else?
Well, I define pornography as any material that's written, audio, visual, that stimulates the brain erotically and causes a physiological arousal. So this could be pictures, movies, tapes. It could even be written stories. And some people do distinguish pornography from erotica. Basically, they're just making a judgment that erotica might be a little more softcore and pornography more hardcore. But they're basically designed to do the same thing. What we often call erotica is less explicit, and some people might judge as being less offensive than some of the more hardcore videos that you might see.
Right. And but yet that line would be arbitrary, right? Like, where does that line go? It's sort of in the eye of the beholder. I can't
Well,
remember who said, oh, well, we recognize pornography when we see it, but
right. And so, there's some people who think that the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition is pornography because it shows women very scantily dressed and it is designed to be arousing. But, basically it's just a personal judgment when we start distinguishing kinds of pornography. There's really no clinical way that we measure that.
Right, right. But something as visible as the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, right, is meant to be arousing. It is sexually suggestive anyway, if not explicit, right? Like that falls in this category of sort of what's erotic.
Absolutely. I mean, if you just watch commercials on television, we use sex and sexual images to sell everything from food to automobiles.
Right, right.
So yeah, I'm surprised sometimes at some of the commercials I see because I'm not really clear what they're selling until I watch it for a while.
Yeah, right. What's the actual product attached to this selling?
Right.
Yeah, and I suppose there's things about, when you get to movies like R-rated versus X-rated, like how much nudity there is or how explicit the sexual acts are. But again, where you would draw a line would be pretty arbitrary, it seems to me.
Right. And, in terms of how movies are rated, there are some criteria that's used to do those ratings.
Yeah.
And, what we've seen over the years, I'm almost 58 years old. And so there are things that I see and hear in movies now that when I was a child, you never saw in a PG-13 rated movie. But now it's suddenly acceptable because our culture has evolved and is a little more desensitized to it.
Yeah. Those standards are sort of slipping or shifting over, right? Evolving with our culture. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So if pornography is, at least for our purposes, sort of any material designed to be sexually arousing, how does it show up in your therapy practice? How do problems around pornography show up?
Well, pornography is something that I generally talk about in every initial assessment with a client who's come in for issues relating to sexuality, either personally or within their relationship. But there are a few ways that it comes up as a presenting problem. One is a spouse or partner doesn't like for the client to use pornography, or they have concerns about the kind of pornography that they're looking at or the frequency of their use. And then the second way is the client himself has concerns about the frequency of his use or the kinds of things that he's attracted to. Mm-hmm. And I say he.
But I was going to say, you're saying he.
Yes, because it is mostly used by men. Some women enjoy pornography. Women do not enjoy it to the same extent that men do. And, over 30 years of practice, I've never had a female come to me and say, I'm here because I have a problem with pornography. I've never had a male come to me and say, I'm here because I think my wife or my girlfriend has a problem with pornography. But there have been many times that I've worked with men who show up because they are concerned about their porn use, but most often because their spouse or their partner has concerns about their use.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I don't know what the, studies show or how accurate those could be. I mean, I certainly know women use or view pornography, but it's an interesting thought that, I haven't really heard a woman talk about having a problem with it or concern about that.
Women do use pornography, and there is pornography that's produced by women specifically for women.
Yeah.
But they don't use it at the same frequency, and they tend to not be as curious and look at the multiple varieties of pornography as men do. Women can get bored with it after a while, and men tend to not get bored with it as quickly or as easily. And, for a long time, we've joked about the romance novels being lady porn.
Right.
Because women's brains are such that, and I'm speaking for you, you can disagree with me if you like, but that women tend to get more sexually aroused when it is related to a relationship. And so the story of a relationship and the story of seduction tends to be more what is arousing for women, whereas for men, we get aroused a little more quickly, and it doesn't have to involve a specific intimate relationship with another person.
Yeah, I think I would take some issue with that, but it feels a little bit like a rabbit hole. But I remember reading, men respond to things visually, and women are more, I don't know, something else. But then there's also the studies that show that women respond sexually to almost everything. When they measure, right?
Yes, and have less awareness.
Yes, and less awareness of their own arousal. So whatever
Right.
whatever the differences are between men and women, and of course those are generalizations. Certainly, people can feel concerned about their own viewing of pornography or their partners.
Yes, and we're still sorting out how much of that is really true biology and how much of it is cultural.
Right.
How much have women been socialized that they shouldn't be thinking about sex?
Yeah.
That sex should be driven by the man in their life.
Right.
And so, maybe that's why even when women experience arousal and it's measurable physiological arousal, that there's less awareness of it because there has been such a push culturally to deny sexual thoughts and sexual energy in a way that men are not culturally encouraged to deny that.
Yeah. This is part of why I find working in sex therapy so fascinating. It's so complicated. It's so nuanced. It's so systemic. It's so intertwined with things. I just find the whole thing fascinating.
Yeah. And, one thing I learned a long time ago is to never say that this is always how it is.
Right.
Because there are exceptions. Maybe I haven't met the exception yet, but they do exist.
Right. So before we go into talking about how porn viewing could be problematic and how you work with that and things like that, I did want to just sort of ask your opinion about pornography and erotica being useful and healthy. And where do you put it on the spectrum of healthy use versus problematic?
Well, we don't really have a clinical measure for that. Mm-hmm. That is really an evidence-based clinical measure. That's mostly opinion. And that opinion can vary from one person to another and from one therapist to another.
Right.
But I think some ways that it's helpful is that it does provide a visual reference for sexual behavior. Mm-hmm. And many of us are visual learners. Men tend to be more so than women. And pornography is generally the first introduction to any kind of sexuality education that males have. Males have generally had their first encounters with pornography by puberty around ages 11 to 13.
Yeah.
And this was true even before the internet existed.
Right.
Young boys would get access to porn because their fathers or brothers, uncles, neighbors had it. Or if that was not the case, they had a friend whose father, right, brother, or uncle had it.
Yeah.
So pubescent boys are already having sexual thoughts and they're already seeking out visual information to address some of the sexual curiosity that they're having. And they usually don't have an adult in their life who will sit down with them and talk with them about sex in a way that is factual and that meets their curiosity. And so, even though we don't like for adolescents to be using pornography, unfortunately, that is one of the primary ways that they get their sexuality education because they're not getting it factually and effectively in other places.
Yeah, and it's so sad too to think of it as sex ed because, of course, it really isn't sex, right? Like it's theatrical, it's entertainment, it's exaggerated. Actually in the book I just am finishing up, I call it a caricature of sex, right? Like any kind of porn scene, sort of. Well, because it's accentuating one aspect or one thing, or it's not a well-rounded display of what sex necessarily looks like between partners. And you hear this with young people now, sort of expecting it to look like porn, and it's affecting behavior a lot.
Right. Absolutely. And there are many things that you just don't get to experience in pornography that you experience in a real situation, mm-hmm, in a real relationship with another person, even if that relationship is very short-lived, because there is an emotional aspect to sexuality. And, it doesn't happen as easily and as quickly, and we're not as ready and prepared as people are in, especially professional pornography shoots.
Right.
But even in some of the ways that people prepare themselves when they are doing what we sometimes call homegrown porn, a lot of pornography is produced now in private homes by just private individuals who are publishing their own stuff and putting it on the internet. And there's still things that you don't really catch and you don't really get the full effect.
Right.
Because you're not experiencing it.
Yeah. And certainly if you're watching pornography, you may be getting a view of, this is what men or women enjoy or want. And that's, of course, not necessarily the case with any partner you might have. Right. So it really sets expectations in a way that's unrealistic a lot of times.
Right. And, it's why we need to be talking about sexuality more in schools and universities and at home.
Yeah.
To educate adolescents about what sex is.
Yeah.
And how to have those discussions and how to make requests and how to respect boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm preaching to the choir here.
Yes, definitely. I was thinking too, when you say one of the uses of erotica or pornography is visual reference, I will often suggest that couples look to their response to material to get insight into their own eroticism, right? And then that's a way they can share it with the partner. So if you find a movie, or a written erotic story or pornography that really turns you on, there's a reason for that, right? It gives a little glimpse, a window into your eroticism. And so you can share that with your partner. Not that you have to recreate that porn scene or it's not about the whole thing, but it really can help, sort of nail down, this is what really turns me on.
Absolutely. And I have some videos that I loan to clients. I explain to them before I loan them out what they're going to see in the video, because some people refuse them. Some people don't want to see those images.
Yeah. But
they are intended to be educational. And there's some things that people really cannot conceive, and maybe their partner is asking for it, and the other partner can't really conceptualize what that would be like, what it would look like. And so a video does give a visual reference for that. And many of the videos that I use, people are interviewed before the activity and after the activity, and there's often a sex therapist who's providing commentary on the activity. And so it's educational in those ways. Right. But most people don't seek that out. They are, they're doing a search. They're going into an adult bookstore. They have some shame about what they are interested in. And so pornography is accessible. It's easy to get your hands on it and to look at in a way that's very private, and you don't have to ask anyone any questions.
Right. So that would just remind me, when we put the show notes together and I've got links to your site and things like that, it would be fabulous to include links to those videos, like the names of them or the publisher or something, in case the listeners are interested in seeing what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah.
That would be great. Hi, it's Jessa here, taking just a quick break. Thanks for listening so far. I wanted to let you know about the sex quiz that I've put together called How Healthy Is Your Sex Life? I've taken a close look at the typical ways that I see couples get into trouble with sex, including avoidance, neglect, negativity, distraction, and boredom. And the free quiz will score your individual results based on these factors. And then I provide my recommendations and ideas, including my top 10 sex tips, which will help you make instant improvement. If you'd like to take the quiz and see how healthy your sex life is, you can do it right now at sexhealthquiz.com. So personally, I know that clients will come in and either believe that they have a problem or their spouse or partner might. How do you personally distinguish when somebody's got problematic behavior around porn viewing and when it isn't? I mean, I know part of it is just how our clients feel about it, but when is it a problem and when is it not, from your perspective?
Well, I asked the client to tell me about the consequences of their use. What is the negative impact in your life as a result of this? And sometimes there are real consequences. Mm-hmm. I've had clients who have been fired from their jobs because they are looking at pornography on the work computer, or they're looking at it in their cubicle while there are coworkers sitting in the cubicle next to them. I've worked with people who tell me that they are spending hours a day looking at pornography, and it's getting in the way of them being able to go to class or focus on work or to take care of other things that they need to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. So there are some consequences to how people use pornography, but I depend on the client to tell me what those consequences are.
Yeah.
I want them to get specific. And if it's their spouse that has a problem with it, I want their spouse to be real specific about what their concerns are. Mm-hmm. Sometimes she is afraid that she's not enough. She may be afraid that he's lost interest in her. Mm-hmm. Some people regard pornography use as cheating.
Yeah.
You're going outside the relationship for a sexual experience that you should be coming to me for. So sometimes these discussions are a pathway for us to begin to look at some problems that are happening in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And, some men tell me that they don't really feel like they have a problem with porn. They come to the session because their spouse is concerned about it or their partner is concerned about it. But if their spouse or partner didn't have a concern, they wouldn't feel like it was problematic at all.
Right. I've seen that repeatedly.
Yeah. And so men often tell me that they use pornography as a way to relax, that it is how they subsidize their sexual relationship with their partner if they have a higher sex drive than their partner, or there are times that their partner is not interested when they are. And some men describe it as their me time.
Yeah.
I had one man who said to me, she gets her nails done, I look at pornography. For him, it equated to the same thing. And it didn't have anything to do with him losing interest in her or, in his mind, his relationship with her.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, men more so than women don't always equate sex with love. That men compartmentalize it in ways that sometimes women do not.
Yeah. So say a little bit more about how do you work with couples where the viewing of pornography is not causing consequences in the guy's life, right? He would not view this as a problem, but his partner's upset about it, right? They come into therapy about this and each feels, I imagine, totally justified in their perspective on this. How do you help them come to some sort of common ground?
Well, we can't always come to common ground, but we start just by helping them listen to each other and what is underlying his use, him explaining to her why he uses it, what he gets from it, and for her to explain to him how she feels about his use, what it means to her when he's using. And, we would like for people to have these discussions before they move in together or before they get married, but they often don't.
Right.
And we often make assumptions that our partner has the same attitudes and values that we do around sex. And quite frankly, when we're courting a person, we're on our best behavior. And there are things that we don't tell them because we are afraid that they're going to shame us, or they're going to be offended by it, or they're going to dump us.
Yeah.
And, stuff like this, sometimes it just doesn't come up. And the partner she's not fully aware of what he's looking at or how much he's looking at it until after she's pretty engaged in the relationship.
Right.
So having some discussion, facilitating some discussion that should have been had earlier on but didn't happen, and helping them come to an understanding about what their own individual beliefs are around pornography and what it means when their partner is looking at pornography. And this can be a pathway to people really beginning to have some more candid discussions about sex in their relationship.
Yes.
And to begin to talk more openly about their sexual relationship. And it's a great time to talk about sexual boundaries and to talk about making requests.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe he's looking at things that he doesn't think she would really be interested in. It's a great time for me to provide some education around sexuality and maybe the kinds of porn that he might be drawn to or that she might be drawn to.
Right.
So it can open the door for some really good discussion in couples that is going to happen eventually.
Right. Right.
And what we don't ever want to do is side with one client against another.
Yeah.
We really want to facilitate them talking to each other and having a greater understanding about the other one's position on this subject.
Yeah. All right. So if you're working with somebody who does want to change their behavior, right? They're having consequences at work or even just because it makes their partner so uncomfortable, but maybe more in a case where the behavior's gotten out of control and creeping into their work life, or, they're not getting other things done. How do you counsel somebody?
Well, when I work with clients who want to change their behavior around anything, I want them to get really clear first why they want to change it. We have more success with changing our behavior if it's a change that we personally want, and if we can envision that our lives are going to be better as a result of that change. And so, certainly with someone who's looking at pornography at work, there have already been consequences.
Right.
And sometimes, there are some very real potential legal consequences with some things people might be engaged in, not just pornography, but sexual behavior that they might be engaged in.
Right.
And so, I want to provide as much education around that as possible, and then begin to help that person identify some ways that they are going to make lifestyle changes that will help them facilitate this change. I often use food as an analogy with sex because it's another thing that our brains are hardwired to crave.
Right.
And it's another thing that many of us in our culture identify having a problem with.
Right. Right. And we can't just go without. Right.
And we can't just go without. We have to find a way to have it in our life in a way that enhances our life and doesn't create problems for us.
Right.
I often use the metaphor of if you're on a diet, do not go into the ice cream parlor just to see what flavors they're serving. Mm-hmm. Once the closer you get to that thing you're trying to avoid, the more you're going to want it.
Yeah.
So don't hang out on the edge of it. Don't hang out with the ice cream tasting group. If that's your peer group,
right,
and those are the people that you primarily socialize with, you're not going to be able to go to the ice cream tasting party. Mm-hmm. So, change those people in your life, maybe change the places in your life, change the circumstances in your life that are going to help you make this specific change that you've targeted. So giving up porn, it means that you're going to give up your subscription to certain websites. Mm-hmm. It means that, there might be links that you've saved on your computer that now you're going to delete. The stash that you have in your house, you're going to need to get rid of it if it's magazines or DVDs. If you really are making a decision to give it up, then you're going to have to take the actions of someone who's giving it up.
Right. Or I assume some people, I wonder how often do people say they want to give it up completely versus moderate their use?
Well, of course, people want to moderate their use. Everybody wants to cut back a little bit.
Right. I'll just cut back on my ice cream Sundays. I don't have to.
Right. Yeah. And then, when we discover that cutting back isn't working, then we might have to make a different plan.
Right.
But if he can eliminate his porn use at work and he can only look at it at home, then great.
Yeah.
Then we've eliminated that problem at work. But, we want to make sure, we want to spend some time measuring how successful he is with that.
Yeah.
And why weren't you able to do that already? Because that's pretty cut and dry that you already know there's a policy in place.
Yeah.
All these men that I've seen around this already knew that there was a policy in their company that you don't look at pornography on the work computer, or you don't look at it while you're on the job.
Yeah.
And so if that policy was not sufficient to deter you, then what other kind of deterrence are we going to have to build in?
Right. I'm also imagining that for a certain percentage of people, this is behavior that is about self-soothing or anxiety or stress, or, it's an attempt at a solution to a problem, and maybe it has to be replaced with some other technique, right? I mean, if you're not going to go get the ice cream sundae, are you just going to starve, or are you going to eat carrots, right? Like we need to fill in maybe with something else that's a healthier choice.
Right. And so we can explore what that is. It might be more time with their partner.
Mm-hmm.
It might be self-pleasure without pornography,
mm-hmm.
or, self-pleasure that happens at the end of the day when you get home and you're in privacy. Yeah, there's some other ways to explore that with the client. And the path that we take depends on what's unique to that client, what his unique consequences were, and what's unique about his reasons for use, what he's getting from that use.
Yeah.
Generally, men use pornography recreationally, and on average, they're looking at it 15 minutes, and maybe 3 times a week.
Yeah.
That's really how most of the male population uses pornography.
Right.
These cases of people who are looking at it for hours at a time, or who are looking at it daily and looking at it at work, those are really not that common. They're more rare than how most people use pornography.
Right, right. And I would imagine that most people who are viewing pornography are not going to say it's a problem, right? Like they're feeling like this is in bounds. This is totally, it's healthy, it's productive, it's not a problem. It's, not grounds for concern.
Right. And so men generally do not show up on their own to get help with pornography.
Yeah.
It is because there is someone in their life who has expressed concern about it.
Right.
That brings them in. And so on their own, they generally do not see it as a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Would you want to just say a little word about how people can find a little bit more information about you?
Yeah. My website is NashvillePsychotherapy.com. My practice is in Nashville. I'm also licensed in Florida, and I do some online work as well. And then my Facebook page is The Sexual Integrity Coach. So those are 2 places that people can find me.
Great. I will definitely put those links in the show notes along with some of those videos and any other resources you want to share.
Okay, great.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with me.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.